Welcome back, everyone. It's just another day in the life as a military wife. And with it being election season week, time period, I don't know. Honestly, it feels like elections take longer now than they ever did before, but that might be just me. Um, I figured it would be apropos to discuss what it is like in the military experience to be a vote and just different challenges and complications. Anyway, basically what military voting looks like in a nutshell, and some resources for military families who might be struggling to vote because it's complicated for them. So, as always, I am your host, Sam Wolf, and you are listening to Life of a Military Wife. All right, so what is it like as a military voter? Um, Military have multiple options. They can register locally, every place that they live, as long as it is inside the United States. If it is outside of the United States, then they've got to, there's a whole different ballgame for that. Or they can vote in their state of record. So basically, if they were originally from Washington, but they're stationed in Hawaii, they can still vote in Washington as long as they're residents of Washington still. They've kept up their residency. Um, and a lot of military will do that. A lot of them will change every place they go. It's based on personal preference. We personally have chosen to keep our home of record as our voting resident, like our voting and residency there, out of convenience for a lot of different things. Um, it has allowed us certain benefits when it comes to car registration and driver's license updating and things like that. And considering how much paperwork and how much you have to do every time you move, just taking one thing off of that to-do list felt worth it. But there has been some major drawbacks. Honestly, the lack of communication from our state of residence with us about what the current status and requirements are for military voters has been a huge problem. There's been it's just made it an absolute nightmare. There'll be changes in policy on what type of verification or how often we have to verify, and they won't contact us to let us know. They'll just take us off the list if we don't meet the new parameters. And this has happened multiple times. So we've had to very actively be on top of it. Oh, there's a primary coming up. Okay, well, we got to make sure that they haven't changed everything since last time and that we're still current. And the other conflict is that we get different answers. Like if you finally actually do get someone on the phone, someone will tell you one thing, another person will tell you another thing. Very frequently, as the dependent, as the military spouse, I've been told a completely different set of stuff that just wasn't accurate at all or up to date. And usually it's been easier for my husband to get direct answers. And that's because there's a system set up for more dealing with the service members directly. And once he gets his foot in the door, then he can ask for me, which is frustrating because the service members are so busy and sometimes they're deployed or they're in the field and they don't have access to take care of these things. And so, unless you're thinking about it 3, 4, 5 months in advance, which doesn't always happen. It can very quickly sneak up on you, and you can just miss an entire election cycle because you didn't re sign some paper or recheck some box or something, and they didn't bother to tell you you needed to do this. And that's just what I have dealt with. And so, as I was thinking about, and then on top of this, my husband has been unable to vote when he's been deployed. And and that got me thinking, I'm like, wait, I've heard that from other people that they weren't able to vote when they were deployed. And there's a lot of different reasons and excuses and justifications and explanations I've heard about why deployed service members aren't getting ballots and able to vote. Um, I'm not really sure completely where everything falls on that, but at the same time, it's happened to enough people, it's occurred often enough that there's got to be some factor. So that just got me thinking, well, instead of just sharing with you my experience and some resources I found and whatnot and different things, I wanted to see if other military spouses felt the same way. Oh, sorry. Or had experienced similar things. And so I threw a poll out on a military spouse page that I am a part of. And I'm going to be completely straightforward with you on this. I did not think of polling people um, soon enough. So the sample size is small, and they're all self reported military spouses. I did not verify their IDs. So this is by no means some like officially catered, paid for, proctored poll. This is definitely just, an opinion poll thrown out on Facebook. So take it how you will. But the options I gave people for themselves, for the spouses, was the first was I vote absentee from my home state and have had little difficulty doing so. I vote absent. Second one was I vote absentee from my home state and have struggled to be able to get my ballot. The third was I register locally every place we move when possible and vote locally. Number four was I do not vote because of the difficulty in doing so. And number three is I just don't vote. No excuse there. Just that they just don't. And I told them they could leave their comments below, and I would appreciate that. And then the two options, that other question was service members' access to voting while deployed. And it says the first response is my service member has been able to vote when deployed or overseas. And then the second response was my service member has not been able to vote while deployed or overseas. Now I'm going to break down the answers. So the first one, I vote absentee from my home state and have had little difficulty doing so. 28 of respondents agreed with that. I vote absentee from my home state and have struggled to be able to do so. That was 18%. And then 22% said that they register locally every place they move. 17% said they don't vote because it's just too difficult. It's just too complicated. Then 3% said they didn't vote at all. And yeah, that's basically where we fell on those ones. As I was watching this all come in, because I'm a nerd sometimes, and I was watching responses come in, I found it interesting. I'm going to be honest, I found it interesting. But anyway, that I vote absentee, but I've struggled was actually leading as a response for quite a while, and then it dropped back down. But it's pretty close, all the responses. There's not a really solid answer, which kind of fits the feedback I've gotten is that it's just complicated. If you want to vote as a military service member or spouse, you really have to put some effort into it. And honestly, voting I think is worth it. But I feel like there are things that might be done that could make it a little bit easier, like, communication between the states and the service members to make sure they know whether or not their stuff is up to date or not. I understand that I get the whole it's your responsibility if you want to vote, make sure your stuff is up to date. And yes, there is an argument for that. But at the same time, as military families, we move a whole lot. There's a lot going on in our lives. And it's just, yeah, it would be nice if they told us when they changed things. Now, if they've very clearly explained the whole process and they've communicated and we don't do our part to keep things up, yeah, I can get it. And that's my bad. That's on us as the military family. But communication, I feel, could just be better. And maybe that's just with me and my state of residence, which yeah, maybe I don't know if I've said where we're from originally or not. But anyway, moving on. But that's where that is. And it got me thinking, my husband, when he was stationed overseas for a hardship tour, we learned that there is actually a provision for this. Go figure. Evidently, and I looked this up just to make sure that I was not, misinforming people, but the federal postcard applications for voting for military, there's a whole federal voting website. And in it, it talks about absentee voting and how you can get a ballot and through that postcard program. But then it goes down to explain something we learned about when my husband was on a hardship tour. Evidently, you should be able to get assistance with starting your voting at any level, any unit level, by going to your installation's voter assistance office. Raise your hand if you knew that you had one of those. Oh, yeah. No, I don't think anyone does. I'm maybe this is something that's told to the soldiers and the service members and the airmen when they get their in processing briefs, but that information sure as heck does not make it way home to the spouse. Or at least it didn't to this spouse for quite a while. I don't know. I feel like they get so much information during their in processing. It's like drinking from a fire hose, and there's no way they're going to retain it all. And I kind of just wish that they would include the spouses a little bit more or something. But anyway, evidently there's supposed to be a installation voter assistance office. So that's good to know. The other thing is that you should be able to contact your service voting action officer. Did you know you had one? Most military families are probably going, nope, never heard of that. So the only reason why I even knew that some of these things existed is because, like I said, on this hardship tour, my husband was approached and they're like, "You're in charge of voting now." And he's like, "Wait, what? That's a thing? That's a job? Like that's actually a responsibility? What?" He'd never heard of it. They're like, "We want to make sure that everyone has a chance to vote and that they know how to vote and they know where to vote in their state and everything. So talk to everyone." He's like, "Okay, sure, fine, whatever." And my husband, because he's, a diligent guy, he went around and found out what state everyone was registered to vote in and looked up all the voting registration procedures and approached them and like, "Do you want to be able to vote? Okay, here's how you do it, yada, yada, yada." And most of them were like, I don't want to deal with the hassle. It's too much work. Finally got one guy who was like, "Yeah, yeah, I really want to vote. I want to vote." He got him all the information and then he followed up later. He's like, "Did you get everything filled out and turned in and whatever so that you'll be able to vote?" The guy's like, "It was just too complicated. I gave up." And this is sadly so true because in a lot of these places where they have hardship tours or deployments or whatnot, it's the other side of the world. So if you have questions or concerns or issues, or you're struggling to fill out the forms, getting a human being on the phone to actually answer your questions is yeah, that's laughable. Like we had issues with that with a lot of things, but I can just imagine with voter registration and everything, it's more complicated. So it was definitely a struggle. And like I said, my husband was trying to assist his fellow service members, but most of them just called it quits because it was too complicated. And I think that's sad. And honestly, most of the situations I asked Philip, I'm like, "Were you even told how to vote while you were deployed?" That the the whole thing before with the how to vote, that was a hardship tour. Now, if for anyone who doesn't know what a hardship tour is, a hardship tour is a permanent change of duty station without your family accompanying you. That most common for the military, for the army at least, is like Korea. That is a very common hardship tour for the army. And there's hardship tours in lots of different places in the world. I think there's a couple in Latin America, there's Egypt, MFO, and yeah, just a bunch of different places. So that is a little bit more stable. There's current mail coming in, there's secure mailing procedures and whatnot. That's a little bit more logical that they would be able to try to get the voter stuff figured out. I have yet to meet any service member, and I'm not saying they don't exist. I have just yet to be informed of any service member I know of who's ever been able to vote while deployed. Think about that for a second. And the number of deployed individuals has gone down due to the Afghanistan situation no longer being a deployable situation. But that's quite a few people. When I was going through the whole burn pits, that's millions of people who at some point or another, that's like 3 million plus people at some point or another who've not been able to vote. These are all legal US voters. Well, okay. I will one caveat, there are some service members in the United States military who are not yet citizens of the US. Okay, so maybe fine. They are mostly legal US voters. But still, like that's quite a bit of people over quite a huge chunk of time. Like, that's yeah, and so it got me thinking. I was just like, is there's got to be some way. There's got to be some thing. And again, we're for those of y'all who are military, we know um military readiness, operational whatever comes first. Yes, but still, someone should be able to vote. Like, voting should not be impossible on a deployment. If we are able to get secure mail and packages and documents back and forth, ballots shouldn't be unreasonable. And anyway, I just feel like there should be some provision for at least a federal provision so they can vote in federal elections. Maybe they wouldn't be able to vote state or local or something. But anyway, solutions got to be a way to do this. I'm not saying I have the answers, but I felt like considering everything that's being talked about lately with how voting is conducted and how all of that happens, it would be worthwhile to mention what military voters experience on a regular basis. It's not easy. And it's ironic that the individuals and families that are sacrificing for the defense of this nation have such a hard time being able to exercise their constitutional right to vote. That said, I hope that you took advantage of your constitutional right to vote if you are a legal registered US voter, and that hopefully in the future we can find a way to work out some of the difficulties we have with our election systems, whether it's for military voters or otherwise. As always, I am your host, Sam Wolf, and you've been listening to Life of a Military Wife.